morning, everyone. Apologies for that little wait. Thank you so much for your patience. My name is Maeve. It's my privilege to work with Music Connects, the organisation that brings you these wonderful guided listening sessions. This series is all about giving you a chance to hear the music before the live performances, which are happening in a couple of weeks' time, so that you can become more familiar with it. You can feel more confident listening to it, and you can get the most meaning and enjoyment out of the live performances. You can also just come to them as standalone events because they're wonderful and fascinating, and we're so lucky to have wonderful speakers with us each month. Today we have Ronan Guilfoyle, who will appear on the screen shortly, all the way from Italy. He's there on his holidays, so he's very good to join us today. I'm sure he's having much better weather than we are. We also have Dr. Ramin Haghjoo, who is a lecturer in the University of Galway Music Department. So we have a really special piece to share with you first today, and that piece is called Legacy. You will be the first people in the world to hear this piece. It is a newly composed piece by Ronan Guilfoyle, dedicated to his father on his 50th anniversary. And we will be premiering this piece on Inishmore on the 1st of June. If you feel like a bank holiday Monday trip to the islands, we would love to see you there. If you can't make it all the way across the water, you can join us in St Nicholas Collegiate Church on Tuesday, the 2nd of June at 1:10. Both of these concerts are free. Everybody is welcome. The same program will be played at both, and we really hope that you'll be able to come to at least one of those and enjoy the music with us. I would like to thank our funders, the Arts Council of Ireland, the University of Galway, and the City Council for making this series possible, and of course free of charge. It is possible due to a cultural partnership with the City Council. This is a new initiative since last year, and it makes special projects like this possible. This is something we've dreamed up for many years, and it's lovely to be finally bringing it to you. And also a thank you to the library for hosting us each month. We love being here, and I know it's a lovely, comfy environment for you as well. So I'm going to hand you over now to Ronan Guilfoyle, all the way in Italy, to hear about his piece Legacy, and we'll take a little break after that before moving on to Ravel String Quartet.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, okay, great, because I'm just looking at the musicians and myself, so I can't see the audience so well. Good morning. Hello. Good morning from Italy. I'm in Puglia, from Giovanezzo in Puglia. That's the boot section of Italy. And I'm very happy to have the opportunity to speak to you this morning and to listen to the music, because we haven't had an opportunity, the band and myself, the quartet and Matthew and myself, to be in the same room at the same time due to our extraordinarily complex schedules. So this is going to be new to me as well, so to listen to the music live. But I'm very happy to have the opportunity to have this music played. It has a very personal meaning for me. The music is about my father, or is dedicated to my father, who passed away 50 years ago last December. And last December I went to Anna McCarrick and I wrote this music, or got most of it done there. My father was an extraordinary man. He was really into the arts, really, or music, or you could call it the world of ideas, which in the 1960s Ireland, early 1970s, was not the most common thing, so he was a maniac about music in retrospect. He really was. He was crazy about it. And he was crazy about music of a very specific kind. So he liked modern classical music from about 1870, 1880 onwards, and modern jazz from about 1945 onwards. And he had all the downstairs rooms in the house connected to a speaker which he had up on the wall, so that if he played a record, he could hear it no matter what room he was in, and so could we. We didn't have any choice. So we spent the soundtrack of our childhood was music of this kind. So we grew up listening to Bartók, Stravinsky, Prokofiev, Ravel, Shostakovich, Sibelius, Charles Mingus, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Thelonious Monk and Earl Garner, and which was very unusual. As I said, Ireland in those days, it's probably not that usual these days either, but really wasn't usual in those days. So kind of a 20th century classical music and jazz of the second half of the 20th century was perfectly normal music to us. It didn't, I mean, I've the Rite of Spring, and if you're 4 or 5 and you've got the Rite of Spring blasting out around the house, you're not there going, wow, this is a very difficult piece of music. It's just music, So we grew up with this soundtrack to our lives. He was also into literature and theatre, film. He was kind of a Renaissance man of the arts in a way. He wasn't an artist himself, but he was really into it. And he had 8 kids. That was more classic Ireland in the 1960s. 4 boys, 4 girls. I was second eldest, and so my mother had a crucial role in our upbringing as well. We used to joke about the fact that later on, of course, my father dealt with the necessities of life, like music and literature, and my mother dealt with the luxuries like bread and shoes, and had to get this for the kids. And he was really a proselytizer, an evangelist for music. So he used to do things like he would bring 3 or 4 of us into the sitting room, sit us down on the couch and say, he'd point to one of us and say, you're the French horn, you're the clarinet, you're the viola, you're the cello. And then he would put on a record with a symphonic orchestra. And the game was, when you heard your instrument, you stood up. And of course, you always wanted to beat your siblings. Of course you did. So by the time I was 8 or 9 years of age, I knew every instrument in the orchestra by sound. I could tell the difference between a cor anglais and an oboe, etc., viola, violin. And the other thing he used to do was he used to get us to sing along with jazz solos. He would make up words to solos, so jazz things, and we would sing those along. So we grew up with this extraordinary music education, oral music education. And unfortunately, he got ill and died at a very young age. He died at the age of 48 when I was 17. And I didn't start playing music at all until I was 18. So he never heard a note of anything I played. And not only was I a musician, but 2 of my brothers are musicians as well. So, and there's no mystery as to why that is. And I have another sister who did a master's in creative writing, and I have another sister who's a visual artist, and etc. So he was incredibly influential on our lives, but tragically he never really got to see the fruits of this stuff. So on the 50th anniversary of his passing, I really wanted to write a piece that would be dedicated to him, but would also contain elements that are typical of what he loved. So this is why this piece has string quartet, which is such a classic, classical ensemble, one of the great ensembles of any kind in the world, and also has an improvising clarinet player in Matthew, who, of course, clarinet is great in classical music too, but I wanted to write a piece that had like that element of composed music, which he loved, with the jazz improvisation, which he also loved. So this is the piece that it's a 5. We're not going to hear all of it today, obviously, but it's a 5 movement piece, and it contains improvisation in 4 of the 5, and then there's 1 movement which is a scherzo just for the strings, which we won't hear today. But so this brings me to the first piece, which is actually the second movement, and the title. I'll tell you the title of all the piece is called Legacy. It's my father's legacy, and the first movement is Legacy. Second movement, which we're going to hear, is called Mr. BP's Interrupted Blues, and I'll explain that in a moment. The third movement is the scherzo, which is a low-down, hoedown. It's a kind of a bluegrassy kind of thing, but with sharp edges. And then there's a slow movement called Embers, which was my memory of him. I remember when I was a kid, he would play things like slow movements from particularly the music of Bela Bartok, music for slow movement from strings percussion and Celesta, etc., and he would sit looking into the fire, which at that point was usually pretty late at night, he would be smoking a cigarette and looking into the embers of the fire. And I still remember the atmosphere of that, the kind of, and I realized that at 6, 7, or 8 years of age, I actually had a taste for that atmosphere. I enjoyed it. I didn't think it at the time, but I was quite happy to sit on the couch and just watch him looking into the fire and listening to this, particularly the music of Bartok, but there were others too. And then the final movement is called Together Again, and I'll explain that when we get to it, because I have some excerpts which we'll do first. But the first thing we're going to hear, which is the blues, it's called Mr. BP's Interrupted Blues. Now, BP is, there's a famous jazz tune called Mr. PC. It's kind of a little bit of a play on words. Brendan Patrick was my father's name, BP, Mr. Brendan Patrick. And it's called an interrupted blues because it is a blues form, which is a 12-bar form, but it's constantly interrupted by the world of 20th century classical music. That's the kind of way I was thinking about it. So I wonder, the opening of it is with pizzicato and the strings, and I use this technique that comes from West Africa, polyrhythm, and this is Cuban, particularly I use a kind of a Cuban, which is a music of the African diaspora. The African diaspora, music of the African diaspora is usually refers to music from South America, north of South America, like North Caribbean, and into North America. So Cuba, Brazil, Colombia, Dominican Republic, and of course North America. And that music is all influenced by the slave trade. So the people who were enslaved were from the most part from West Africa. And all they could take with them was their music and their stories. They weren't allowed to have anything else. And so their music, when it mixed with the music of the colonial powers, so Spanish music, French music, English music even, what came out of that is about 90%, I would say, of the music that we hear today is descended from that. So funk, rock, jazz, Brazilian, samba, salsa, reggae, it just goes on. It's music of the African diaspora. And the thing that is particularly important in West African music is the idea of polyrhythm. And that's where you have rhythms layered on top of each other. And I did this as an introduction to this piece to start it off, and then the clarinet comes in and plays the blues theme on top of that. And I wonder if, before we play the whole piece, could I ask the strings, could they play the pizzicato section just up to the point where the clarinet comes in? And you will hear this layering. The cello starts, then another next instrument, and it's all pizzicato. Perfect. Thank you. So that's the opening, and you can hear that pizzicato, the polyrhythmic thing using the pizzicato, so that this is very much an African diasporic technique where you've got all these little moving parts that when they play together create a great groove. It's a bit like a Swiss watch, an old-fashioned Swiss watch. If you open a Swiss watch, each of the wheels is just doing a tiny little spin, but when you put them all together, it creates this very big thing. So maybe we'll hear this piece now. So this piece, as I said, is called Mr. BP's Interrupted Blues. So it grooves along, and then suddenly it gets interrupted by the 20th century, the music of the 20th century, and then it comes back in again. So it's constantly kind of moving back and forth like that. And Matthew, as is the case for all of this piece, is playing both written parts and improvising. So if you can't guess which one is which, then we've done our job properly, I think. Bravo. That was fun to listen to, even through a crappy little computer speaker. So I'm sure it was a lot of fun. I hope it was a lot of fun for you too. So that's the second movement, and that kind of is the you can hear both of those elements in it, and that happens a lot in the piece in general. This kind of moving between these two worlds, because of course modern jazz was very influenced by modern classical music as well. So it's not incredibly difficult in its harmonic language, in the chords and all of that. It was very influenced by classical music, and an awful lot of great performers like Charlie Parker, Miles Davis, and these people were into Stravinsky and they were into Debussy and Ravel and Impressionism. So it's not impossible to blend these two worlds. We're going to the next piece we're going to hear is actually the last movement. And before we hear the whole last movement, I'd just like to show you a little bit about what I did with this. This piece is I wrote together again on it as it's the title of it, and the reason for that is my mother, unlike my father, she lived to a great age. She was 93 when she died, and there's a very long story associated with this where I'd written this piece for her, not this piece, but a piece for her. And it was being performed in the Hugh Lane Gallery, and she got very ill very quickly, and she went into a coma, and we had to make a decision as to whether to play the concert or not while she was in the coma. Because we knew that she may pass away at any minute, and my son was playing guitar, so he was his grandmother, so it was quite a decision, and we decided to do it anyway. And we felt that I had 7 siblings still with her and all of that, and we decided that we would do it and do it as in honor to her, since the piece was being premiered, it was dedicated to her, rather than not do it. And so we did it, and we went back to the hospital, and she passed away just as we arrived. So it's quite a lot of emotional weight on this piece. And what I decided to do at the last movement of this piece, which was dedicated to my father, was to include this little theme that comes up in my mother's piece, in the and bring the two of them together at the end. So the idea is that they're mother and father together again, at least in the musical sense here, and so that I will point that out to you. So the first thing is that my father's theme is used in the first movement and in the last movement. And in the first movement, I'll just ask Matthew to play. This is on example 1, Matthew, the first clarinet theme there. Well, that's it. It's very simple, and I use that. It gets developed through the first movement. But what I decided to do with the last movement was to do a version of that, but in 3/4, and then change a little bit the octaves, so it becomes something slightly different, but still with the same notes. So maybe Matthew, you could do the thing that it becomes. So this becomes this. That becomes this. Yeah. So that's how the theme from the very beginning gets transformed into this at the end. And then what I decided to do with that was to take that theme, have the strings come in with it, and then harmonize it. So it would use a lot of chords from typical 20th century harmony, that would be familiar to people like Debussy and Ravel, to make it into a lyrical kind of thing, not just a groovy thing. So maybe we could play example 2 down to the end. Yeah. So that's the theme with the strings and that kind of chugging rhythm. And then what I wanted to do is to take that and put the chords underneath it to create it, turn it into a more lyrical thing. So perhaps if we could play example 3, you'll hear this and hear it developed as a theme as well. So that's how the theme gets transformed into a kind of a more lyrical thing. And then later on, the music goes into a kind of a mysterious section, and my mother's theme arrives out of that. So if we could have a look at example 4, you'll hear this in the this little staccato theme. Okay, so that's it, that little do 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 do. And so here is where the two of them appear, they arrive together. So if we could play, in other words, you'll hear that this theme from my father, and then you will hear emerging out of that the theme from my mother's theme, if you like. So from example 5, please. Okay, so that's how the piece ends, with this. About 2/3 of the way through the movement, my mother's theme arises out of this. It gets played a lot more than we'll hear the whole movement now in a moment. But that was it was an important thing for me from an emotional level, to do that, actually, after having written so much music about my father. And of course my mother, my father did all those things, but my mother did extraordinary things too, especially when my father was ill for a long time, which he was before he passed away, and how she managed what she managed. They were made of different stuff in those days, for sure. How she did what she did with 8 kids and a very sick husband, and managed to keep the whole show on the road, was extraordinary. So I felt that it would be very apposite at the end to bring in this theme from my mother. So this is the final movement, and I hope you enjoy it. I'm looking forward to hearing it, because it's the first time for me to hear the whole thing.
Thank you, Ronan. That was wonderful.
Yeah, I can. Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to thank the musicians for the work on the piece. I know it's a lot of work involved, and it's not an incredibly easy piece. And I've worked with the quartet once before, but I was in the band that day. We played some of Ian Wilson's music years ago now, and a long time ago, a student of mine, but became a great colleague of mine. So I'm really very happy that they agreed to do this. I'm very grateful to them for the work for just agreeing to do it, and to you, Maeve, and all of you because it means a lot to me. Obviously, this piece. I'm going to be there for the full performance in Ishmore next. I'm really looking forward to it. And I'm happy to take questions, but first of all, I just wanted to thank the musicians and
well, a big thank you to you as well, Ronan. It's a wonderful piece. We can't wait to hear the whole 5 movements. And you've also given us a wonderful excuse to work with Matthew Berrill, who's one of our favourite collaborators. We've worked with him on many projects over the years. An absolute pleasure. I know the quartet agrees with me that it's wonderful to have him. Okay, thank you so much, Ronan. Thank you, everyone.
Enjoy.
So welcome back. We are taking a little turn now to Ravel, which is very much linked to the first piece that you heard, because I think Ronan mentioned that Ravel was one of the composers that his father listened to and subjected the children to in the house through the speaker system. So we wanted to connect to this piece as well during the June programme, the Legacy programme. So to speak about this, we're delighted to be joined by Dr. Ramin Haghjoo, who is a lecturer in the University of Galway and an amazing musician himself. And he's going to be bringing us through mostly the second movement. You'll hear a lot of echoes, I think, in Ronan's piece through the wonderful pizzicato that's featured in this piece. But I won't take any more of Ramin's talking notes now. So Ramin, over to you.
All right, so everyone, we'll go ahead and then start straight away. As you can see, we'll be looking at the second movement of Ravel's String Quartet in F major. So in first understanding Ravel's style, I often find it helpful to compare him to Debussy then. So here I've intentionally chosen then 2 pictures which actually show perhaps the best contrast between the 2 personalities, with then the very fastidious Ravel versus the more bohemian Debussy, just hanging back and smoking a fag, right, as you see over there in his little chair. But of course, naturally, there are many similarities, so that in fact a lot of people who are not professional musicians can sometimes confuse the music between Debussy and Ravel. So what are these similarities? Well, first, both of them are associated with the art movement Impressionism and then the art and literature movement Symbolism. First of all, it's important to explain then exactly what Impressionism is, because some people can misunderstand Impressionism and just think it's kind of like a blurry way of painting. So now from the laughs, I think probably most of the people in this group then wouldn't fall into that category. But just to be clear about it, Impressionism then aims to depict things more as how they actually exist outside of ourselves. So it aims to depict things more truthfully. The idea being that the human mind is endowed then with a very unique ability to then carve things into units. And this is what gives then the human species the ability to have representational language, to have mathematical thinking, and basically everything that human civilization has created up until now. And is something that distinguishes us from the other animals, of being able to carve out units into all our percepts, and then naturally then with our own thoughts as well. So it enables then me to say, like, this is a chair, and that's another chair. There are 2 chairs, and here are 3 chairs, and there's a scarf there, and there's a wire there, and all that sort of thing, right? Other animals wouldn't be able to do this sort of thing, but we can, and it's what enables us to use tools and manipulate the world around us in the way that we do. So what that means then is then when we're seeing the world around us, we naturally carve things out into then objects and outlines, right? But what the Impressionists tried to do is they said, well, you know what, that's not actually how the world actually exists outside of ourselves. That's the way the human mind processes the world to be able to then manipulate the world around us, right? The way we learn how to use tools and everything. So to better get closer to the way the world actually exists outside of us, let's just try taking then the immediate percept of light and color as it strikes then the cornea of the eye, before it's actually processed into then clear defined shapes and outlines. Okay? So that's what then the Impressionist artists tried to do. And then what musicians, first really starting with Debussy, tried to do in his music as well. Now Debussy didn't like to be directly associated with the artistic movement because he's like, I'm not doing like Monet flower painting and music. It's not exactly the same thing. But the aims were similar. Debussy then, just like the Impressionist artists, was aiming to create music that more clearly depicted then the world outside of the way we construct it. So then rather than music here in this case, rather than, for example, taking then clear set forms and clear set connections between harmonies, what we call functional harmony, he then took away then the functional harmonies, basically then removing then the feeling of the human ego's involvement then in the music, and also then blurred all of the outlines of the forms as well, to then try to create more of a sense of then experiencing something without then it being then processed in the brain as then clear objects that you're attached to. So that's what then Debussy did. Now also using the symbolism, so the symbolist movement here, I won't go into that as much, but just to be brief about it, the symbolist movement then was focused on just the hidden meaning behind then common things that we see. Just be very blunt and brief about it. Now, Ravel himself inherited a lot of the ideas of Debussy over there, and was deeply influenced by him. He was even less than of an impressionist than Debussy, as we will see in a second. Now, in terms of the external aspects of their language, they both use then extended harmonies, then which became the foundation for jazz harmony. So the idea of using extended harmonies, it started with Satie and Debussy and then passed through with composers like Ravel, where then you take common major and minor triads but add extensions on them, sevenths, ninths, 11ths, 13ths, and so on. Now, a difference between then jazz, that is standard jazz, versus then what Debussy and Ravel were doing is that standard jazz takes then those harmonies, but actually puts them into a more standard, song type harmonic progressions. That is using standard, what we call cycle of fifths progressions. Whereas then what composers like Debussy and Ravel were doing were actually trying to work against then standard song-like cycle of fifths progressions in the way harmony went, to try to remove our attachment to the direction of the harmony. So now they also use unorthodox scales, so not just standard major and minor scales, but whole tone scales, pentatonic scales, and different modal scales, as we'll see. Another thing that also went into jazz. And lastly, they both then had more of a focus on timbre and color. Again, thinking of then the impressionist idea of just having the percepts of then light and shade, in this case the oral equivalent of that, strike our ears, and then just being able to focus on that before then trying to structurize it in our own minds. Now, the differences between the two is perhaps the most obvious difference that we hear in his music and that you see in the personalities is that, Ravel then, wouldn't have then a single hair out of place, as you can see in this photo over there, and we hear that in his music. Whereas Debussy then, well, there's Debussy right there. You get the idea, right? So Debussy then was very much about just creating these nebulous worlds in much of his music. So this is this is why Ravel preferred well-crafted forms than creating music, though with an impressionist aesthetic, but approaching it with the technique more of a draftsman, of meticulously then writing each note and considering the relations between each note. So basically, then this means that Ravel's music then is indeed, as Ravel himself admitted, less impressionistic than Debussy. He kind of puts then the outlines back in the paintings, if you want to think of it like that. So another thing that creates this effect is then Ravel's music being then more melody-driven than Debussy. So Debussy then is in effect to try to create this general impression. Then he avoids using then distinct singable melodies, but it's all basically, so you can think of it as decorative effects that then become the soul of the music, whereas Ravel goes back to using then clear, distinguishable melodies. Now, so in sum though, like you see, though this language is similar, Ravel took a more classicist approach, emphasizing form and precision over Debussy's more free-form atmospheric writing. So, the string quartet here, it's a relatively early work of Ravel's when he was very much then, like, you know, I'm your biggest fan Debussy sort of era, when he was in his 20s. And he directly modeled it on Debussy's string quartet as an homage to it, using actually most of the, not just the same structure of the movements, but even much of the same titles of the movements of Debussy's string quartet as well. So he uses what's called a cyclic approach, and what that means is that the themes of the first movement reappear in other movements, oftentimes transformed in different ways. It was dedicated to his teacher, Ravel's teacher, Gabriel Fauré, but at the time was actually much more appreciated by Debussy, who greatly praised the quartet, which you might imagine since it was really written as an homage to Debussy's own. So the second movement that we'll hear today is an homage to then the second movement of Debussy's string quartet. What you'll hear for the similarities here is you'll hear then a use of pizzicato and unorthodox modes, mainly like a Phrygian and Mixolydian modes, to create a very Spanish-type atmosphere of, you know, guitars and, you know, kind of like ole kind of sounds and all of that. They're both in ternary form. They both then bring back ideas from the first movement. Now, you won't be familiar with then the Debussy first movement is here, but you can imagine it. And then they both then have motorized repetition of the opening rhythmic idea over and over again. So first, can we just hear really quickly here, just the opening of Debussy's second movement, just with the link. So now, you'll hear now Ravel's second movement, where he basically took Debussy's as a model, digested it, but then it makes it much more, as we'll hear Ravelian. In contrast to Debussy's, you'll hear a very stronger feeling of precision, tightness, and tidiness than in his construction, while still having a lot of the same sorts of ideas and evocations. If you wouldn't mind just going from the beginning up to rehearsal number 15. Just like so over there. And then ending indeed, like you hear, with a very kind of Spanish ole, rump, like a little guitar. Okay? Go ahead. Now, before I get into then going through the music, then section by section with you, so I just want to then clarify here, especially for an event like this, where we're thinking about how we listen to music, of then what the different levels of experience are in an aesthetic experience upon hearing music. So first, we always experience things first on a personal level, where we have private associations. I remember, I think the first time I heard then that second movement of the Ravel, I suddenly got this image of like sun showers, right? But you know, someone else, they might hear it, and who knows, they might imagine, I don't know, like a GAA game they went to, right? I have no idea what your private associations would be. But the whole point over here is that it's just parts of the music that resonate with personal experiences that you may have. and that is not necessarily shared by anyone else. And those sorts of then responses to the music, you never have to worry about if they're like correct or incorrect. Those are then your own personal natural responses to the music, and you should cherish those. And it's something that the music evokes in you based on your own experiences. Now, we also experience music then on a cultural level where we have a shared system of meanings that we all agree on, like when I'm talking about the ole or the Spanish guitar sound. That's something that everybody in our culture familiar with these sorts of then signs in music then would agree on. It's like, oh yeah, I hear that, and we can all sort of agree on those sorts of things. Okay, so that's then how we experience music on a cultural level. Right? Now, on a human level, we experience music then in terms of then that human, what we call the a priori way the mind works. That is then something based in the structure of the human mind and the way then we go and perceive things around us based on that. That is breaking things into units and enjoying then the relations, listening for the coherence in the music. It's what enables us in listening to music to hear like, oh, there's the first theme. Oh, here's the second theme and now in that instrument. And oh, now I hear this theme then transformed. And oh, and now then I'm expecting this chord to come. Oh, but this chord didn't come. It was a big surprise, right? All these little relations and modalities and like I said, listening and hearing the consistency in the music, hearing then coherence between the parts. That's just then something natural to the human mind's ability to process music. Okay? And that's a lot of what we'll be talking about in the section by section playthrough. Now, we also experience music on a living level, just as a living being. All living beings then experience basically a flow of intensity in the world around them, whatever living thing it might be. And so we experience that as well. We also experience music just as then levels of intensity. Of course, as sounds get louder and smaller, even if keeping the same volume as well. Like for example, you could have then a single tone, but then the tone could have a trill, and it creates more intensity in the sound. And of course, higher sounds would have more intensity than lower sounds. All these sorts of things, to the point of if I play then certain music then at home, like sometimes the cats can get very bothered, right? If it's be too intense, right? So we also experience music in that sense, and that's important to our experience as well when we feel rising intensity and lowering intensity, as well as experiencing distance from equilibrium, when the music feels settled at home and when it feels like it's taking us away then from that point. And this is something else that all living things then experience to any sort of extent of then being at a state of equilibrium, away from equilibrium, and then the tensions between those. And lastly, we also, of course, experience music on the level of being, because as it gets a little more philosophical, but basically music, we have to remember, unlike most other arts, it does not exist. Okay? It has no existence itself, that it is simply then vibrating sound matter. That whereas then most other arts, you actually have then an actual physical product that this is what it is, right? And you look at it like an image or anything else. Music is not that case. That music then has no existence of itself. It's just then musicians here making then the air which already exists around you vibrate, and it strikes your ears and creates this illusion of then having some sort of being, of having some sort of existence. But it's an illusion that's entirely in your own minds. Okay? So so in music then, when you experience music on the level of this, then this illusion, it depends on then how much the music is then more true to its actual nature of just creating a sense of a flow of becoming versus then creating an illusion of being, of actually then having then modes of existence. But I won't go too much into philosophy here. So let's go on now. Talking about then shared imagery that we would have, that is those shared cultural signs in the music. One thing I think a lot of people would agree on based on our common cultural education is then we'd hear lots of these pointillistic effects created by pizzicato. So here I want to just put up a little painting by Georges Seurat, where you kind of get that sort of feeling with then the little pointillist effects bringing out then effects of then light and shade all the way through. Okay? And you also then naturally then, through the piece, you hear this play of light and shade as harmonies and modes magically shift then from one to another. Another common imagery we would have, like I mentioned earlier, would be a feeling of Spanish festive scenes with this plucked strings and guitar-like sounds. Okay? Now, in the B section of this piece, you'll hear more languid, Moorish kind of scenes of twilight. This is another common cultural association people at the time, and many of us at this time as well would have as well, if you're familiar with those sorts of Iberian kinds of styles of music. And here I used an image right there, which kind of gives a feeling of then the B section over there. Okay? So you might then recall, for example, like if you've been to Spain, like more melancholic Spanish evenings, wistful, sensual feelings, but all the way remembering it's sort of like, Frenchy Spanishness. So still a very strong sense of France at the same time. So now we'll go ahead and then go through a little play-by-play of the music. So the first section here, the scherzo section proper, the first theme then is an A minor melody, usually implying then the rhythm of 3/4, the melody itself, but the accompaniment alternates between 6/8 and 3/4. So if you don't mind, could I just hear then the violin 2 and viola, just the opening 4 bars, please? That's it. So can you hear us goes da 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 yep da 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 like that. So it's alternating between then 6/8 and 3/4 over there, and that's what gives it that little dancey quality. Yep da 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 yep da 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 da. Okay. So this little opening section of the first theme ends on what we call a half cadence. That is a dominant harmony that implies the return of A minor, our home key over here. But instead it'll go into A minor, doing something that we hear in this impressionist style music. It then shifts us instead to something completely unrelated, C-sharp Dorian in this case for anybody familiar with those modes. So let's go ahead and hear now the whole first theme over here from the beginning up to rehearsal 15. Ole. Right? So there, over there, that's how it ends right there. On you hear that harmony at the end, which we call then the dominant harmony, kind of setting up, you could, if you imagine the way it started, da, 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 you'd imagine maybe going back into that, right? So it sets up that expectation for the return of then that opening feeling over there, return to a state of equilibrium. Now, following this, we hear the second theme, which, as I mentioned, will not go into that key, but will then slide into something very different. This theme over here, it's in 3/4, and it's derived from the second theme of the first movement. So like I said, this piece is uses what we call cyclic technique, using then themes from the first movement and then slowly then deriving other themes from them throughout the rest of the piece. Could we hear now from the first movement of Ravel's string quartet, then from between rehearsals 4 and 5. Thank you. So, hearing then that little thing, da 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 da. So now, that in your ear. Now, if you could hear from now the second movement over here, between then rehearsal numbers 15 and 16. So hear the second theme of the second movement, derived from that theme you just heard there. That's good, yeah. And so there, especially, you can also even hear it. It also ends the same way with the da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-dum. If you remember the way then that theme ended then in the first movement. It's faster though, right? You can hear faster than before. Before it was da-da-da-dum. Here's da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-dum. So hopefully you can hear then the connection over there. So just about right where they had stopped over there, we heard then wisps of the first theme start to intrude in this. Bum, bum, ba, ba, bum. Remember that first opening theme we had in the second movement over here. And then the feeling of 6/8 slowly takes over, da, 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 instead of that da, 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 da. Right, leading us back to the first theme with another unexpected harmonic shift, taking us to A minor with a jolt and with more intensity than the first time you'll hear. So let's go ahead and now hear leaving from where we just left off over there, from rehearsal 16, right, where then the first theme starts intruding on our second theme, and then into then the return of the first theme. So it's between 16 through 19. Thank you. There you are. So there you heard the way that first theme then slowly took over then from the second theme and then came back with more intensity there. Now, just after that, we'll have the return of the second theme, but this time in a different mode. This time it coming in, instead of C-sharp Dorian, coming in first in C Mixolydian. And then towards the end of this scherzo section, a wisp of the first theme then appears under the tremolos, ending the section in A minor, harmonically taking us back home, back to a place of then equilibrium and rest. So go ahead, continuing on from rehearsal 19 to rehearsal 22. There you go. They're ending very satisfyingly then back in what we call our tonic harmony on our tonic A minor. Okay, go ahead. Now, following this then is what we call the trio section. It doesn't mean that it's just three people. It's just the technical term for this kind of form. So this middle section now will have a contrasting style over there, like we saw with the when I was talking about the imagery. So a little bit of darker, more wistful, more melancholic, right? More thinking of evening and darker colors all the way through. You'll hear then a soulful melody in the cello with then slinky chromaticism in the upper strings. The key will be unstable at first, but it'll settle into then B flat major within this section. So let's go ahead and have a listen to that. From 1 before 22, right where we just left off over there, and then going in up till 23. you'll hear this now will shift back again to the original key of the second theme that we heard then in the first section of this, right, in the scherzo section. Remember when it first came, it was in C-sharp Dorian. So here it'll then shift back into that with similar texture as well. But you'll hear that it'll go off in a different direction every time it starts up, as if it's trying to get us back to that feeling we had in the second theme in the first section. But then it's failing to do that, and instead then taking us on little waves and splashes with many magical harmonic shifts. So let's listen from 6 after 23 there to 24. Right. So that's then this first part over there. I was skipping that for time, but that's all right. So then, so now we'll hear then that go ahead and continue on from 6, the same place, and then up till 24. So right from where you left off there, 6 after 23 up to 24 now. And then the pizzicato first theme slowly starts peeking through the texture and is coupled with the trio theme, which then reappears in the first violin. This theme continues over an E pedal, that is that dominant harmony that will take us back to the opening, setting up here the harmonic return of the A section in A minor. So let's go ahead and hear now 24 to 26. Hear it? Back to that trio theme there. Here then, with that harmony then over there, and then it's setting us up to go back to A minor over there, to hearing that it's taking us right back into the opening. However, you'll hear the transition, it actually ends up going in the wrong direction. It ends up wandering away from where we want it to go and actually gets stuck in G sharp, then Mixolydian minor on the way. Whoops, right? Right? But then Ravel very cleverly, after he does this, instead of trying to work his way back to A minor, he just takes one bar and just dissolves it, then says, oh, just, away with it, and then dissolves it right back into A minor for the theme. So let's hear 26 through 28. Like, oh. So where do we go from here? there, as you hear then, when we came back to the theme, it's the same as before, but now fortissimo with plucked chords all the way through, thickening the texture, creating a climax of intensity with our return to equilibrium. Very satisfying. So then finishing this over here, the return to the section will be truncated compared to the first time, something commonly done here in this era compared to when the scherzo section was originally done, because we don't necessarily want to hear the whole thing all the way through again. Modern day we have less patience for that sort of thing, right? So then it passes through many harmonic shifts then, ending abruptly but satisfyingly with the first theme instead of the second at the very end over here. So continuing on now as we go into our back to our second theme and then going right to the end. So from 28 then, yeah. All right, so that's then the whole tune over there. So we'll go ahead and then hear now the whole thing. So as you're listening, I just put this slide back up just to remind you to, be open to experiencing the music on all these levels. We talked a lot actually in doing the playthrough of it, of this level over here, of being able to listen for the different themes, the relations between the themes, our anticipations of our expectations of what's coming up next, and then thwarting those expectations through different things. So that's a lot of how we enjoy music on this level, which is the level where we have to use our heads the most when we're listening to music, but do continue to enjoy the music on these other levels as well, which is oftentimes a bit easier, right, than this level where we have to then, have the gears working at the same time. So enjoy, everyone. Thank you.